Everybody, happy Memorial Day. Do you say happy Memorial Day or do you just say Memorial Day? Always confuses me. What's the most respectful thing to say? Just, it's Memorial Day. Looks like we got more people on locals than anything else today. What? Is there some problem with YouTube? We only have 4 people coming in from YouTube. That's weird. Maybe something's going on over there. Hey, YouTube's just frozen at 4 people. Huh. Weird. All right. Once again, I'm your holiday entertainment, not a lazy podcaster like those other people. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the highlight of human civilization. It's called Coffee with Scott Adams, and you've never had a better time. But if you'd like to take this experience up to levels that nobody can understand with their tiny, shiny human brains, all you need for that is a cup or mug or a glass, a tankard, shells or stein, a canteen, jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure, the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything better. It's called a simultaneous sip, and it's going to happen right now. Go. That was just enough, just what I needed. My co-host today will be President Trump.
Fox and Friends in the morning, they're very honorable people. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first.
All right, well, that's enough of that. Well, did you know that the Tesla Optimus robot is going to use the same battery as the car? I don't believe it's going to be the same size though. But apparently, your Optimus robot will be able to work all day long. I was kind of wondering how much you could get out of your robot before it had to charge itself. But apparently, all day long. And Musk has, one of the toughest summers ever, because not only is Austin getting ready for full self-driving, so Musk has to focus on that. I saw somebody say that X might be gaining the ability to send money and the ability to chat, which I guess would be different than DMing, I guess. And so he's working on that and Starship launch and AI, and he's working on the DMs working, because the DMs were not working again today. He's got the busiest summer. Man, we're not going to hear much from him. Did you know, according to the new atlas, that the Air Force is planning a rocket that can bring some enormous amount, 100 tons of cargo, to anywhere on Earth in 90 minutes. 100 tons. Now, I assume that's just for either military or emergency response. You wouldn't really want to spend that much money to bring 100 tons of cargo anywhere. But how could that compete with Starship? I'm kind of puzzled, because I don't think the U.S. Air Force knows how to make that reusable. And maybe it's not. Maybe it just stays there. There's something wrong with that story. I don't believe you could just, the Air Force could land a giant rocket anywhere they want in 90 minutes, and then it could take off and go back home. I don't think so. But that's the story. Well, you've heard versions of this before, but apparently the University of Pennsylvania has found yet another material that can collect water and then release it without any energy. So you'd be able to just, I don't know, hang it up on a clothesline and have it make water out of the air. So the whole problem of running out of water might not be a problem. Makes me wonder if you could put like a little bit of it on a plant and then you'd never have to water the plant. Would that be cool? If you never had to water it, it just took the water out of the air and just dropped it on the plant. That'd be kind of cool. Well, according to PJ Media, the New York Times has a big story about the Democratic Party being in a death spiral. If your political party is ever referred to as being in a death spiral, that's bad. But I guess the evidence includes the fact that, let's see, in the 2024 election, 6 times as many counties shifted toward the GOP as toward the Democrats. While I guess it was just a gigantic shift. So they say that Trump has built an unstoppable coalition of working class people. And the only people left who are representative of the Democrats would be basically wine drinking college moms. That's just me. According to the Epoch Times, Doge says it completed the major cleanup of Social Security records. So, all those records of, there were like 12 million people on the data who were over the age of 120. So they got rid of about 12 million records, 12.3 million records that were apparently people who now have been marked as deceased. So they didn't used to be marked as deceased, which means probably fraud. Probably 12 million people fraudulently collecting Social Security. But they put an end to that. Well, you know how Trump had threatened the European Union with a 50% tariff? Well, they called him Sunday night and said, please don't do that. And I guess it was a good phone call, and Trump agreed to push it in a month. Once again, that whole threatening of a tariff, it seems to work every time. Because the main thing he wanted is for them to just get serious about negotiating. And if they weren't serious or they weren't doing it fast enough, he's just all 50% tariff. Tariff for you, tariff for you. And then they call him and they say, no. And then he says, all right, if you're just going to try much harder to get this done. So that tariff threat is working. So I saw a long post on X yesterday by Stephen Miller. Now, as you know, Stephen Miller is an important part of the administration, one of the smarter people there. And he wanted to explain that people had it wrong about the big, beautiful bill, the budget bill. And he went into great detail saying how it would lower taxes and lower the deficit too. And I couldn't understand a damn sentence in there. Almost none of it made sense to me. Now, it doesn't mean he's wrong, because he seemed to have a good grasp of the topic at a much greater detail than I've seen before. So he might be right, but I can't tell. I can't tell by his writing. It was just amazingly impenetrable, but might have been right. I don't know. But meanwhile, Ron Johnson, Republican, who is very much on the side of the president and the side of Stephen Miller, he says the opposite. He says that the budget's going to exacerbate the national deficit. So could it be true that Stephen Miller is right, that it will decrease the deficit, while Ron Johnson is right that it will increase it? We can't tell. It's really complicated. Uh, and the other thing that you need to know, and I wonder how many of you knew this, there's essentially the budget is cut in two parts. There's a small part, which is this. The so-called big beautiful bill is actually the smallest part of the budget, and you only need 51 votes to pass it. So that works for the Republicans because they have a slight majority. So they can get this budget reconciliation process, as they call it, through with a narrow vote if it comes to that. But the biggest part of the budget, they would need 61 votes to presumably beat a, what do you call it? What's it called when the other side just talks forever? What's that called? I always forget the name of that. I've been stuck on this one before. It's called a. You'll tell me in the comments in a second. Filibuster. Yes, a filibuster. So the biggest part of the budget is not even part of the big beautiful budget. This is just the little stuff that we can change, and the big stuff probably won't be able to change it at all because we won't be able to overcome the filibuster, I'm thinking. And then there's a question about, are we cutting Medicaid or not cutting Medicaid? So Speaker Johnson has settled on this weird messaging where we're totally cutting Medicaid, but we're not cutting Medicaid. So he's literally saying both things at the same time and selling it. So he says, quote, "We are not cutting Medicaid in this package," Johnson said Sunday on the State of the Union. "There's a lot of misinformation out there about this." All right, so that's pretty clear, right? You can't be more clear than that. We are not cutting Medicaid in this package. And then later he says that the goal of is to protect Medicaid for vulnerable Americans. I'm like, oh, okay. That's consistent with not cutting it. By removing those who should not be receiving the benefits, such as illegal immigrants and able-bodied adults who are not working. So he's not cutting Medicaid, and the way that he's going to do that is by cutting all these people who are getting Medicaid and taking them off. He's totally cutting Medicaid. He's just cutting it for a certain two classes of people. Illegal immigrants, most of you would agree with that, but able-bodied adults, mostly men. So apparently, and then the Kaiser Family Foundation estimated that nearly 200,000 people in Louisiana alone, that's Mike Johnson's own state, could lose Medicaid coverage because of the cuts there. So 200,000 people just in Louisiana alone will lose their coverage. And then Mike Johnson says, oh, we're totally not going to cut Medicaid. No, I'm not disagreeing with anything they're doing. I'm just talking about the messaging, that they're getting away with saying they're not cutting it. At the same time, they're massively cutting it. But they're massively cutting it from able-bodied men who should get jobs and not be receiving it. And Johnson says the focus is on fraud, waste, and abuse, and specifically these young able-bodied workers who are taking advantage of the system. We don't want that. No taking advantage of the system. Now, also, I only learned this today. Apparently, Mike Johnson says they tucked into this big, beautiful bill. He told Face the Nation this. A provision for that would restrict federal courts' ability to enforce some injunctions. So you know how every time Trump orders something, there's always some federal judge who says, not so fast. Here's an injunction. I will prevent you from doing it. And then it has to go to the Supreme Court, and Trump usually wins. So apparently they stuck that into the bill, and it's meant to restrict activist judges. We'll see. Um, as long as the Senate doesn't try to take it out, I guess. So here's a thing that I'm going to agree with Trump on quite a bit. So I think there was something like 31% of Harvard's students were foreign students. Now, on one hand, you might say to yourself, there are plenty of good reasons why a foreign student should be allowed to go to Harvard. But Harvard was not allowing white men and Asian Americans to get into Harvard. And the slots were being filled up by people from other countries. Now, the problem is that if you get a degree from Harvard, and maybe this is changing quickly, but if you have a degree from Harvard, isn't that like an amazing thing for the rest of your life? Why were we giving 30% of them to people from foreign countries when there were people who were absolutely qualified, the Asian Americans who were being turned down for Harvard, totally qualified, probably lots of white guys too, and they just couldn't get in because of their ethnicity. But they're letting the foreign workers 30% of their students. Amazing. So I'm with Trump. Send them all home. We should have never been in this situation. So I'm glad he's fixing that. And you wouldn't be surprised that Just the News is reporting that a judge has halted a judge has halted Trump's order to get rid of the foreign students. And that's why Speaker Johnson is trying to stick into the big, beautiful bill something to prevent these judges from doing exactly this. So I don't think this will stand. I would imagine that Supreme Court would say you can't do that, or possibly the big, beautiful bill will pass, and then it will be legal for Trump to say, we're going to ignore you, U.S. District Court judge. So we'll see how that goes. Newsmax is reporting that one of the big problems with student loans is that there are so many people who are behind on their student loans, it's causing their credit scores to plunge. And the credit scores are plunging so much that if you wanted to do something like rent an apartment, you couldn't do it. Now, you're probably not able to buy a house, even if you had the cash. Well, I mean, you wouldn't have the cash because you're close to being a student. So if you can't buy a house and you can't rent one, well, what's going to happen to you? Are you going to have to hope that your parents take you in? Somebody's calling it a grift that I had cancer. So some of the worst people in the world woke up early to watch my show. How many of you think that my cancer is a grift and I just made it up? There are some terrible people in the world. Terrible people. Anyway, so I know somebody who once got on the list of squatters. Now, it was a special case situation with her boyfriend, and they were breaking up, and he tried to get her out of the house, but she squatted. She squatted very successfully for a very long time. But once you squatted, you can never rent a place again because literally nobody in the world is going to rent a place to you if you've ever even squatted once. So we've got this big problem of people who made genuine mistakes. That was a genuine mistake, but there's no way to recover. I feel like there's something that needs to be adjusted or fixed, or there needs to be a special place you can go or something. But there's going to be a ton of young people who could never find a place on their own, and they're never going to have kids, they're never going to get married, just because their credit score is low. And in some cases, the story is that they didn't know that they'd missed a payment, they didn't get the mail and stuff like that. But your life could be just absolutely savaged by your student loan. Well, according to that original Sin book, that's that Jake Tapper book and Alex Thompson, when we're learning more every day. So apparently, the people who were really running the country when Biden was in office was a group that called themselves the Politburo. Now, Politburo is sort of a reference to communism, where there's a group of people in charge. But here are the names of the people that, according to the book, were actually in charge. So if you want to know who is running the country, well, we've got some pretty extensive reporting on that. And I've said this before, but the scariest part about this is that we've never heard of most of these people, at least half of them. So these are the people who were running the country when Biden was in office: Mike Donnellan, Steve Ricchetti, Bruce Reed, Jill Biden, Hunter Biden, and sometimes Ron Klain, sometimes Annie Tomasino, and sometimes Anthony Bernal. So that was the Politburo. So it was exactly what you thought it was. You know how you thought to yourself, I feel like there's some group of people who have just taken charge of my government, and I don't even know their names or who they are. That's what was happening. That's exactly what was happening. There was a small group of people you never heard of, half of them, and they were running the country. Now, the book also says that Biden himself was usually involved in decisions, but I feel like this group might have been a little bit more involved. the troll with the all capital letters. Let's get rid of that troll with the all capital letters. Well, Alan Dershowitz had a suggestion that makes me feel good because it was the same thing I would have said. So whenever I agree with Alan Dershowitz, I think, oh, look at me. Look at me. I didn't even have to be a lawyer, and I got that one right. And he points out that if you want to use that Alien Enemies Act to get rid of, the worst of the immigrants, the illegal ones, the gang members, etc., and that's been kind of blocked because they need due process. He says this: you just have to give them due process, but it's up to you to decide what the due process is because it's not defined. Now, due process for a citizen is pretty well defined. It's in the Constitution. But the courts just say there has to be due process for the non-citizens. So all you have to do is make up a process. And you just say, this is our official process, and now I'm giving it to you. And that process could be as simple as you have 72 hours to mount a defense. And that's it. That's it. You just make sure that they all have 72 hours and maybe the ability to place phone calls or whatever, and then you can ship them back. And I thought to myself, before Alan Dershowitz said it, I thought, why don't we just make up a process and just make the process friendlier to the country than it is to the people that we want to deport. And Dershowitz just says that's all you got to do. Just make up a process, because that's the due process if you say it is, because it's not defined. So we're on the same page there, Dersh. According to the Post-Millennial, about 25% of corporate sponsors have scaled back whatever they were going to do for the Pride Parade. So I guess that's coming up in June. And according to the New York Times, people are pulling back. They're afraid of overdoing it and getting in trouble. So 25% scaled back. And I always thought to myself, then I saw some reference to the fact that the gay pride parade people, they had less money. And I thought to myself, how much money do you need for a gay pride parade? Couldn't you just wear your street clothes and walk down the street? Do you have to dress in a wildly provocative way? Like, why does that give you more pride? Couldn't you just walk down the street whistling and everybody would say, all right, good job. The gay community has done an amazing job in becoming part of normal, the rest of civilization, exactly like they wanted to, and take the win. I always say this. The LGBT, not so much the T, but the lesbians and gays have done such a good job in improving their brand in the United States. And I always say stuff like, have you ever gone to a neighborhood and said to yourself, oh, it's a dangerous neighborhood. It's a gay neighborhood. Nope. It's one of the most successful subgroups in the entire United States. Take the win. Yeah, have your parade, but does it really have to spend a lot of money? I don't know. I think just enjoy the win. According to Bloomberg, the profits from solar power companies have plunged, and the reason is it's too sunny. Now, I don't know how this makes sense, but part of the story is that they had immense amount of captured sunlight, but they couldn't store it because they don't have enough batteries. So they captured amazing amounts of sun just like they wanted to, and then they had to let it all go. So they had very little battery storage. And I'm thinking to myself, is this another thing that Elon Musk needs to fix? I think Elon Musk could fix this. He's got batteries. So Europe, France, and Spain is mostly France and Spain. So they didn't build their solar plant too wisely. How many of you saw the video of President Macron of France being pushed in the face by his wife? So Macron and his wife are in Vietnam. It's part of a international trip they're making. And I don't know what's going on, but you see Macron standing still inside the airplane, but he's getting ready to go down the stairs. So the cameras are rolling and everything. And suddenly you see his wife's hand push him in the face. Like her hand goes over his mouth and just sort of pushes his head. And then he realizes that it's on camera and everybody's watching. And he's got to play it off like, oh, that didn't happen. I think at first he tried to say it was AI, deep fake. Nobody bought that, of course. And then it turned into, oh, it's just my wife being playful. But allegedly, when they were walking down the steps a moment later, he held down his arm so that she could hold his arm when they went down the stairs, and she did not hold his arm. So it kind of looks like Mrs. Macron is not too happy with her husband. So let me give you some advice. If you're ever married to the president of a country, don't assault him on camera in front of the world. It's just not a good look. And none of it was important. It looked like, maybe they were just having some argument about something. It wasn't going to hurt him. It was just sort of a dismissive push away. But we, but you have to see the video yourself. You can decide for yourself. Well, there's a story that several days ago, Putin was in a helicopter looking at some of the front line in the war, and he was visiting Kursk. And allegedly, there was a organized drone attack against his helicopter, trying to assassinate him, basically. And it was Ukrainian drones. And then allegedly, the Russian defenses defeated all the drones and none of them hit the helicopter. Now, I saw a story that said maybe this isn't true. But it would make sense in the if you looked at what Russia is doing right now, which is they're doing massive attacks on Kiev. So it could be that because of the attempted assassination, Putin's just going really hard. And Trump's kind of mad at him. Trump said, I've always had a very good relationship with Vladimir Putin of Russia, but something has happened to him. He is going absolute crazy. He's talking about the severity with which Putin is attacking Ukraine at the same time that Trump's trying to get him to talk peace. But that would make sense if Putin had survived an assassination attempt. So then you could kind of understand. He might be going a little nuts. So Israel has announced, they waited for a holiday to announce this, holiday in the United States, that according to the Wall Street Journal, that the Israeli military on Sunday said it plans to capture 75% of the Gaza Strip within 2 months and push Palestinian civilians into just a quarter of the Strip's territory as part of their effort to get rid of Hamas. Now, here's the weird part. The part that they want to push the civilians into, so presumably that allows them to really get tough on Hamas and their tunnels and finish them off. America is apparently the aid source. So to feed the Gazans who are being pushed into a quarter of the territory, apparently that's your taxes and mine. To which I say, what? Well, why is America paying to feed the Gazans? I mean, I'd rather that they don't starve, of course. But are you saying that Israel can't afford to do it? Like, is there some reason that Israel's war requires the United States to feed the people on the other side of the war? What's up with that? So that part doesn't make sense. Yeah, I don't know why we're doing that. But you might remember that I've long suggested what I called the filter fence, where you move the people into a safe zone that can be determined that they're not combatants, and then you go wild on the whatever's left. And it looks like they're doing the filter fence strategy. Now, when I talk about Israel, if you're new to me, I'm not endorsing anything they do. So I'm not pro or anti anything they do. I just observe and report. So my view is that whoever has power over there, they're going to be accused of genocide by the other side. Now, is that good or bad? It's not up to me. So it's not up to me to decide what is moral or ethical or good or bad. I believe that the children are going to be the victims no matter who had the power and who was doing what to whom. There will be children dying. And nobody likes that. So you could be against children dying, but if you don't have some kind of larger solution with all your brilliance to make it stop, and I don't have any way to make it stop, um, you could just observe. So I observe that they're doing what makes sense for Israel, and that's as far as I'll go. But you can't really be in favor of it. You can just watch it and say, well, makes sense for them. All right. Um, you know the story of South Africa and whether or not there's a white genocide going on over there? And some of the evidence of the white genocide appeared to be fake, but there's plenty that doesn't appear to be fake. And Laura Logan, I was seeing the Vigilant Fox report on this. She says, "Oh, there's definitely a white genocide in South Africa." I didn't realize that she came from South Africa, so she has a little more connection to it than the rest of us. But here's my question. I do believe that there would be plenty of examples of white farmers, being tortured and having stuff stolen from them. But if it's also true that everybody is being, that the crime in general is just so bad that the black citizens are getting just as much crime. In other words, everybody's a victim of crime if you live there. It doesn't matter if you're white or black. It does kind of blur that whole white genocide area. Like if all you have to do to get to be a victim of crime in South Africa is show up, and it doesn't matter what color you are. If you've got money, somebody's going to want to take it from you. I don't know what to call that. I mean, I guess it's white genocide. I guess it is. But wouldn't there be a black genocide happening at the same time? Or doesn't it count if the people who are doing it, the crime, are also black? So you have a different word for it or something? Well, I would say, generally speaking, stay away from massive crime if you can. Here's a story in the Daily Mail. I think it was in India. The story was a little unclear on that, but I think it was India. They convicted somebody for poisoning her fiance by putting sensors on her head and essentially doing some version of a lie detector, but a more high-tech one. So they placed a cap with electrodes on her head, and they played specific phrases about the crime, and then they said, "We can tell by looking at our readout that you're guilty." Now, apparently, it works 90% of the time, but that would not be nearly enough. I do think, however, we're reaching a point where the lie detector, or the ability to read your brain, basically, is going to be so good that your entire trial might be just putting on a cap and turning it on and asking you some questions. Now, we're not there. 90% is not nearly good enough. You need something like 100%. I think we might get to 100%. I think the technology for telling if you're lying could get to 100%. I think it might. Meanwhile, there's some kind of super bug, according to Neoscope, that it's a nasty bacteria that eats hospital plastic. So, a lot of medical stuff and hospital stuff is made of plastic. Well, this bacteria that starts with people, and then I guess it can get into the environment, will also eat the plastic. and it digests medical plastic. It makes me wonder if there's, it's also deadly, so you don't want it in your body. But what makes me wonder if they can modify that thing so it eats the plastic that's in my body, the microplastics that's apparently in my balls. I don't know. Maybe. I feel like the whole too much plastic and microplastics, there's going to be some kind of technological fix where they take one of these nasty bacteria and do a little CRISPR stuff on it and tweak it a little bit so it's not dangerous for people, but it still likes to eat plastic. And then you take a pill every morning with some of those bacteria in there. It's like, it just eats all the plastic in your body and then it dies because it doesn't have any more food. All right. That's all I got today because it's Memorial Day and there's not much happening. But glad I could spend this time with you. I'm going to say some private stuff to the people on locals. It'll mutate and eat people. Oh well. Use the nanobots in the COVID shot to destroy the microplastics. All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining. We'll show our respect on Memorial Day. And I'm going to talk to the local subscribers privately. The rest of you, I will see you on Monday. Thanks for joining. All right, we got about 30